Karen stole my pregnant cousin's water. I'm the chief of national disaster response. I didn't move back to the suburbs to wage war. After 15 years working in some of the worst disaster zones in the country, Hurricane Harvey, the California wildfires, the Dakota chemical train derailment, I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd earned a patch of quiet, somewhere green, slow, and safe for family. So when my cousin Rachel called in tears, 3 months pregnant and desperate for a fresh start, I told her to come stay with me. We found a modest but charming home in a gated community called Summergate. It had clean sidewalks, parks with duck ponds, and flyers about neighborhood potlucks. Peaceful, they promised. Secure, I should have known that in suburbia. The word secure often hides a snake. I'm Logan Rivera. Most folks don't recognize me unless they're in FEMA or follow disaster policy. I'm the chief of the National Disaster Response Division, what most people call the guy who shows up when things really go to hell. But I didn't wear a badge in Summergate. I wore cargo shorts and carried groceries for Rachel. Rachel's pregnancy was high risk. The baby was her miracle after 4 losses. Every day she was here, she looked brighter until she met Karen. Her name was Karen Ellsworth, 62, tightly permed hair, sharp eyes behind gold-rimmed glasses. She claimed to be the president of the HOA, though we never saw proof. She wore a navy windbreaker with HOA enforcement in bold print, carried a clipboard like a weapon, and drove a golf cart with hazard lights. The trouble started small. A note taped to our door. Your lawn is 0.75 inches too long. Then came threats of fines, accusations of violating hydration usage restrictions, which was rich considering we were in the middle of a federally declared heat emergency. But it hit the boiling point the day Rachel's water got shut off. It was 103 degrees that Friday. I came home from a meeting in Deer Sea, planning to grill some chicken and unwind. But I found Rachel collapsed on the front steps, her skin ghost pale, clutching a nearly empty bottle of water. I went to the spigot, she whispered. Nothing came out. She said I violated the community rationing. I asked. Karen. She turned off the valve behind the house. I didn't even ask how she had access. I just ran. Karen was down the street, watering her roses lush, drenched, vibrant red in the scorched air. You shut off water to a pregnant woman, I asked. She looked at me like I was a leaf blown out of place. Community restrictions, she said. Your guest used up her quota. My guest lives here, and there's no community restriction on water, especially during a federal emergency. I wrote the directive myself, Karen blinked. Well, I am the HOA. I decide what's best. You're not the law. Her smirk said otherwise. That night, Rachel and I drove to a motel. I held her while she sobbed from stress and dehydration. The baby's heartbeat was faint at the checkup the next day, but stable. I filed a complaint with the town. They told me the HOA didn't exist on paper. Summergate's covenants had expired in 2016. There was no legal HOA, just Karen. The Monday after the water shut off, I returned to Summergate not with vengeance, but with questions. Karen had disappeared that weekend. Her prized golf cart was nowhere in sight. Her HOA enforcer sash missing from the mailbox hook. She usually hung it on like a sheriff's badge. But her absence didn't cool the simmering rage in my chest. Rachel stayed with a friend near the hospital. The OB advised full rest and hydration. That baby's heartbeat had steadied, but the doctor warned any more heat stress could trigger early labor. I walked the neighborhood like a man on a mission because I wasn't just Rachel's cousin anymore. I was Logan Rivera, the federal officer in charge of disaster protocols, and Summergate had become one. I found it. The lock Karen had placed on the main valve behind our property was one of those cheap padlocks from a hardware store. I photographed it, then called the local utilities office. Sir, the woman on the line said, confused. You're not listed as part of any active HOA. We don't grant access to water infrastructure without municipal permission. Can you send someone out to verify the tampering? 2 hours later, a utility tech named James arrived. He squatted beside the tampered pipe and grimaced. She forced the main shutoff with a personal valve. See this, this isn't city hardware. It's a garden supply part, illegal as hell. I filed the paperwork right there to have it removed. James hesitated. This woman, Karen. Right. She's been aggressive with our guys before, threatened fines, even filmed them. Filmed them. That was her game. Control through illusion, authority through intimidation. But I wasn't intimidated. I went house to house that afternoon, knocking politely, speaking softly. A single question. Do you believe Karen has the legal right to run this HOA? Some shrugged. Others mumbled that they didn't want trouble. A few a nervous couple. An elderly widow spoke candidly. No, she's not legitimate, said Mrs. Carter, a retired teacher. But people are afraid. She posts about violators on Facebook. Shames us. I got a fine for my kids' chalk drawings on the sidewalk. One dad told me. She said it was graffiti. Said she'd alert the sheriff. It was all smoke and mirrors. Karen had built a fake government, an empire of paper threats and fake badges. I'd seen this play out in disaster zones where imposters posed as first responders. But Summergate wasn't Haiti or New Orleans. This was a sleepy suburb 20 minutes from a major city, and yet Karen ruled like a warlord. That night, Rachel called me, breath shaky. She came to the motel. She showed up in her golf cart, parked outside my window, just sat there staring for almost 30 minutes. Then she drove away. No words. I saw red. I drove to the motel, spoke with the manager. Security footage confirmed it. Karen had tailgated another guest through the gate, parked illegally, and loitered in front of Rachel's window. This wasn't just HOA harassment anymore. This was stalking. I reported the incident to the police, but Summergate's jurisdiction was a puzzle shared between town and county. The officer sighed and told me, honestly, we've had dozens of complaints about her, but nobody ever presses hard. People move or give up. I wasn't built to give up. I requested every public record available on Karen Ellsworth. She was a former real estate agent. License revoked in 2014 for falsifying inspection documents. She'd filed for bankruptcy in 2017. But in 2019, she founded something called Summergate Preservation Committee, listed as a nonprofit. That group then claimed to adopt the expired HOA covenants. She'd printed new rules, held elections where she was the only nominee, claimed a title no city clerk ever approved. It wasn't just fake, it was fraud. That week, I called in a favor. My old colleague from Homeland Security, Nina Park, now embedded with the Department of Justice, agreed to open a quiet probe into the nonprofit status. I can't promise action, she warned, but if she's been collecting dues or issuing penalties based on expired law, that's actionable. I didn't need promises. I needed the truth. It was Thursday when I saw her again. She rolled up in her golf cart like nothing had happened, even waved as if we were friendly neighbors. Mr. Rivera, she said sweetly, I trust your cousin has cooled off. I stepped closer. If you ever approach my family again, she raised a hand. Oh, please. This isn't personal. You're simply not following community expectations. There is no community authority. Her smile faltered. You're misinformed. I have documentation. Forged documentation. Her eyes flashed. Are you threatening me? I don't threaten. Karen, I prosecute. She flinched. Just a second, but I saw it. The way her chin twitched, the way her fingers clutched her clipboard tighter. I walked away, but I knew this wasn't over. She would strike again, and next time, it would be worse. That weekend, 2 more neighbors came forward. One had received a lien notice signed by HOA enforcement. Another had footage of Karen tampering with their mailbox, allegedly searching for late dues payments. The police still hesitated. She's clever, they admitted, keeps things in the gray area. But I didn't deal in gray. I worked in life and death. When people pretended to be medics during floods or fake inspectors during wildfires, I dealt with them. And Karen, she was no different. She had built a disaster, and I was going to respond. Summergate was beautiful on the surface, fresh paint, Clipped lawns, trickling fountains, but underneath, it reeked of rot. And Karen, she was the infestation, feeding on fear and fake rules. After filing 3 more sworn statements from residents, I held a private meeting in my garage with those brave enough to show. We sat in folding chairs around a portable fan, whispering like dissidents in a surveillance state. There were 6 of us, Mrs. Carter, the retired teacher Karen had fined for her yellow drapes, Mark and Lila, the young couple fined $500 for a baby swing in the front yard, Amir, the single father Karen accused of unpermitted soil because he was planting halal herbs, Darlene, the disabled woman whose wheelchair ramp was spray-painted eyesore 3 weeks ago by Karen, and me. I got tired of hiding, Lila said, holding her baby close. She bullied us into silence. She told me I'd lose my home. Mrs. Carter added, told me I'd be legally removed for non-compliance. And I believed her. What Karen had created wasn't just a fake HOA. It was a regime. She isn't just bluffing, I explained, passing around the nonprofit records I pulled from the county clerk. She registered as a charitable organization. That gives her certain leeway, but not legal enforcement power. But she's used that illusion to collect over $140,000 in bogus fines and dues since 2020. Amir's eyes widened. That's theft. Worse, I said, that's racketeering. And that was the word I needed because that word opened federal doors. 2 nights later, Nina Park called. Her tone was tense. Logan, she said, you need to see this. Karen Ellsworth's nonprofit. It's not just shady, it's linked to 3 other shell organizations. She's funneled the money through a fake landscaping company, a security patrol business registered in her son's name, and a consulting firm in South Carolina. That's money laundering, I muttered. Exactly. And it gets darker. We pulled records from the county assessor. 5 homes in Summergate went into foreclosure after Karen filed fraudulent liens through the HOA. My stomach turned. She stole homes, more like forced people out, bought them through intermediaries, then flipped them. Big profit, small victims, mostly elderly. Karen wasn't a cranky retiree drunk on fake power. She was a predator running a criminal enterprise under the pretense of community order. I knew what I had to do. I met with my contacts at the Hunt attorney's office under the guise of a policy review meeting. When they saw the evidence, jaws dropped. This is RICO level, one prosecutor whispered. You've got financial crimes, intimidation, fraudulent documents, and potentially elder abuse. Still, they were cautious. She's not stupid. She'll torch records before we get a warrant. She won't. I said, because she won't see it coming. We launched a quiet operation. Nina submitted a preliminary federal complaint. I met with a real estate fraud investigator. Meanwhile, I kept Karen distracted with confrontation. I attended her next HOA meeting, held on the lawn of her house, complete with lawn chairs and a loudspeaker. About 20 people showed up. She stood at the front like a queen, clipboard in hand, reading infractions. Lot 12B trash bin visibility violation. Lot 3A unauthorized sunflower growth. Lot 8C garage door paint mismatch. When she got to Lot 5F, our property, I stood up. Is there a public record of these violations? She blinked. Excuse me, I filed a FOIA with the city. They show no enforcement rights for this committee. She glared. You're disrupting community proceedings? No, I said calmly. I'm questioning a scam. The crowd rippled. Nervous glances. A few phones rose to record. Karen's lips twisted. This man has a vendetta. His cousin's water abuse endangered our drought protocols. I raised my voice. My cousin almost lost her baby because you shut off her water during a heat wave. And I have footage, affidavits, and a federal inquiry to prove it. Gasps. Darlene clapped slowly. Karen stormed off. She never finished the meeting. I expected retaliation. I prepared for it. What I didn't expect was for Rachel's motel room to be vandalized the next morning. Logan Lyer was scratched into the hood of my car. The door to Rachel's room was forced open, nothing stolen. but everything ransacked. Maternity clothes slashed, baby gifts shredded, water bottles dumped. Rachel cried for an hour. I was shaking with rage. I sent the photos to Nina. We're expediting the case, she said. That's witness intimidation. The next day, the feds moved in, but not the way Karen expected. I watched from a parked SUV across the street. 3 black Suburbans rolled up just after sunrise. No sirens, no lights, just quiet boots-on-ground execution. Karen's front door burst open. She screamed as agents swarmed in. Ms. Ellsworth, one said, you are under arrest for wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. She was barefoot, curlers in her hair, the queen dethroned. Neighbors lined the street, phones raised, some clapping. Mrs. Carter cried quietly beside me. She made me feel worthless. She whispered, now she's nothing. But that wasn't the end. That was just the turning point. The morning after Karen's arrest, Summergate didn't feel like Summergate. It felt freer, lighter. Birds chirped louder. Sprinklers ran openly. Children kicked soccer balls on the very sidewalks Karen once patrolled like a prison warden. A neighbor I'd never spoken to brought over fresh lemonade. For your cousin, she said, eyes soft with apology. But beneath that surface relief, the damage lingered. Karen's grip may have broken, but her shadow still stretched over this place's financial records, disputed property claims, and the emotional toll she inflicted like invisible bruises. Rachel was quiet for days. She couldn't bring herself to step foot in the house again until I walked through it first, slowly, room by room. She was in here, Rachel whispered, running her hand across the crib. She touched our things. I nodded. And now she's in custody, facing decades. Still, I changed the locks. The Department of Justice moved swiftly, thanks to the paper trail I'd helped compile and the testimony of over a dozen residents. Karen Ellsworth was indicted on multiple felony counts: mail fraud, wire fraud, impersonation of a public official, tampering with federal disaster infrastructure, witness intimidation, money laundering through a fake HOA. Her nonprofit was dissolved. Her assets, 3 homes, 2 companies, and a joint account with her son were frozen. The court ordered restitution to all residents who had paid dues or fines. For some, it was hundreds. For others, it was thousands. The relief on their faces when those checks arrived, that's something I'll never forget. But still, many were haunted by shame, shame that they had believed her, obeyed her, empowered her through silence. I told them what I told Rachel: fear is not weakness, but silence is how tyrants survive. The county sent an investigator to officially review Summergate's governance. The verdict was clear. The HOA had legally expired in 2016. No extension, no re-ratification, no legal standing. Karen had resurrected it like a puppet one where she pulled all the strings and called it community governance. She filed fake meeting minutes for years, the investigator explained, voted herself president 5 times with no election. They tore down the HOA regulation signs she'd bolted to the park. They disconnected the fake violation hotline. They even decommissioned her beloved golf cart, turns out. It had flashing lights installed illegally. Residents watched as the illusion dissolved. Some were stunned, some wept, but most were angry. I hosted an open-air town meeting 3 weeks later. No HOA, no titles, just people in folding chairs and truth. We called it Summergate Voices. One by one, people stood to speak. She told me I was a bad mother for letting my kids leave their bikes outside. She threatened to evict my mom for having wind chimes. She posted our names online, said we were criminals for planting tomatoes in the front yard. When it was my turn, I didn't talk about her. I talked about us. We have a choice, I said, to rebuild not just our homes, but our sense of community. Not with fines and threats, but with respect and accountability. That's real order. That's real strength. Applause rippled across the park. Someone shouted, "Rivera for real, HOA president." I laughed, shook my head, and said, "No thanks. I've seen enough fake ones to last me a lifetime." 2 nights later, just as we started to breathe again, Rachel's water broke. We rushed to the hospital. 12 hours later, her son was born 6 pounds, 7 ounces. His name was Caleb, healthy, strong, screaming like he already had something to say. When I held him, I thought about what he'd grow up hearing, the story of how his mother nearly lost everything, not in war, not in fire, but to a neighbor with too much power and not enough heart. But also the story of how people stood up, spoke out, and reclaimed their street, their voice, their dignity. 2 months later, Karen appeared in court, gaunt, bitter, still defiant. She pleaded not guilty, but the evidence crushed her. A jury convicted her on 6 felony counts. The judge, an older black woman with no patience for white-collar manipulation, read the sentence without flinching. 20 years in federal prison and full restitution. You used fear and bureaucracy to terrorize citizens. You abused false authority, and in doing so, you undermined the very idea of community. Karen didn't cry. She didn't speak. She left in cuffs, the same way she'd once threatened others with. The season changed. Fall crept into Summergate like a breath of forgiveness, cooler air, rustling leaves, the scent of cinnamon from open windows. But the biggest change wasn't the weather, it was the people. Gone were the clipped nods and silent walks of a neighborhood under rule. Now, we lingered on sidewalks. We waved longer. Children rode bikes in the street, their chalk masterpieces stretching like murals along the curbs. Karen once called graffiti. Amir started a community garden on the old HOA lot, and Mrs. Carter donated benches for anyone to sit. No questions asked. What Karen left behind wasn't a hole. It was a space we could finally fill with something real, something honest. Rachel and baby Caleb moved back into the house. It was quiet at first. She hesitated to water the lawn, still unplugged the doorbell at night, but slowly, day by day, trust returned, not just in the home, but in people. I thought I had to live scared, she told me one night as we rocked Caleb on the porch. I didn't realize how much I'd gotten used to holding my breath. She looked at me, eyes fierce with gratitude. You didn't just fight her, you changed everything. I didn't know how to answer that, because I hadn't done it alone. When the restitution checks cleared, several neighbors pooled their funds to help Darlene repair her ramp and build a covered awning. Others pitched in for Mark and Lila's legal fees from Karen's fake lien threat. What started as private wounds became a communal healing. And the irony, without Karen, the neighborhood ran better than ever. No more anonymous fines, no more Facebook shaming, just a shared bulletin board outside the park with handwritten notes, lost cat, orange tabby named Fudge. Free yoga class at 7 a.m. by the fountain. Bring a mat. Thank you, Logan, for reminding us who we are. The city offered to help us restart a legitimate HOA with transparency and rotation. We voted openly, honestly, and created a simple charter. No permanent president, no fines without consensus, no rules without purpose. Karen's empire was gone. Her name. It faded faster than anyone expected. 3 weeks after the sentencing, I received a letter in the mail. No return address, just my name. Inside was a single sheet of paper, scrawled in large, jagged handwriting. You didn't belong here. You never did. You think justice is real? But power always finds a new face. It wasn't signed, but I didn't need it to be. Karen still had her claws, but she no longer had control. I filed it away. Didn't show Rachel. I wasn't going to let fear have the final word. Caleb's first birthday was a celebration like no other. Neighbors brought balloons. Amir cooked lamb skewers. Mrs. Carter brought handwritten poems for the kids. Darlene wheeled up with a guitar and played "This Land Is Your Land" under the sunset. Rachel stood in the center of it all, her hand resting gently on Caleb's shoulder, her eyes scanning the crowd with a kind of softness I hadn't seen since before everything began. I pulled out my phone to snap a photo and paused, because for a moment, I remembered the way it used to be: Rachel collapsing on the lawn, Karen with her fake badge, a hose twisted into silence. And now sunlight, laughter, music. This was the disaster we turned into something whole. Karen took more than just water. She tried to take agency, trust, and community. But in the end, she only exposed how fragile our silence was and how powerful our unity could become. What would you do if your neighbor tried to control your life with fake authority? Would you speak out? Would you stand alone? Or would you turn a neighborhood into a movement? Share your thoughts. What defines real community and who truly protects it? Let's talk about justice, fear, and the quiet power of everyday courage.